Good afternoon, guys, and welcome to the podcast. I've got Eric Williams, and he is an founder and CEO of Willy. And if you are a leader or entrepreneur who feels stuck and overwhelmed, he helps you streamline your workload, plan for the future, and make teams work better together. And today's talk is going to be all about feeling less stress, enjoying work more, and getting back to what matters most in and out of work. So I'm really happy to have him on to pick his brain and help with this very important issue with entrepreneurs. Eric, welcome.
Glad to be here, Christopher. Looking forward to talking with you and digging in deep on this issue.
Yeah, briefly introduce yourself and we'll dive right into the questions.
Great. I'm Eric Williams. I'm the founder and CEO of Willy, as you mentioned. Really, my passion is helping entrepreneurs and leaders really navigate that transition from doing everything yourself to starting to build a team. And that can happen at a variety of stages of growth, right? Sometimes you have 20 employees before you really start to let go of the reins and start to develop a business that can run without you. It's a transition that as you're growing, if you want to get it up to a certain size, you're gonna have to go through this transition. And it can be a rough transition. Sometimes that knocks people entirely out of the game because they get overwhelmed. They start working 60, 80, 100-hour weeks and just can't, they're too overwhelmed to get out of that mess. And I see so many entrepreneurs go that route, but there's definitely ways to course correct, put the fundamentals, the foundation in the business so that you can grow and scale it effectively without overwhelm, without burnout. And that's some of what we'll dive into today.
Yeah. For starters, the question is do entrepreneurs and business owners, high income, why are they so prone to overwhelm and burnout compared to other groups and populations?
Yeah, I think partly because they're passionate about what they're doing. They're motivated, they're driven. Otherwise, they wouldn't really be in this position. But there's the other side of the coin. When you're driven, when you're ambitious, when you want to see yourself succeed, when you want to see your business succeed, is if you're not careful about putting these guardrails around what you're doing, that you can burn yourself out. And that's really could be the worst of the situations where you actually find traction, you build your business, you start to grow, but you don't have enough of the infrastructure figured out behind the scenes to actually accommodate that growth. And so a busy day turns into exhaustion for the rest of the week, turns into another busy week, turns into catching up the following week, turns into, oh, it's just been a busy month or two or busy quarter, or it's been busy last 10 to 15 years. So I hear that all the time. And I don't want to discredit the tremendous amount of work that entrepreneurs need to do to build their business, the passion, the grit, the tenacity they have to do to get there. But there's an identity shift that needs to happen if you really want to make this business sustainable at some point to be able to transition out of doing the day to day. And that's hard for a lot of people who are driven, focused, and really, or get mental recognition from the grind of the work to be able to have them take a step back and reframe how they're thinking about their business to get into that next stage.
Yeah. And we'll start off with some common problems that the audience may be struggling with. And one of those is their team relies on them for everything and they can't take a break. What are the symptoms and how do you treat that?
Yeah. Great doctor framing on this one. The symptoms, this happens so often, right? It's a great question. Business owners and leaders who are especially experts in the field when they're the subject matter experts and they've built the business up to this point. So they're really the best expert about how the business gets run, a lot of the nitty gritty nuts and bolts of how the business is operating. So they are the expert about how to handle everything. It doesn't mean they should be, it doesn't mean they have to be forever. But usually one of the symptoms of leaders who need to recognize they need to take a step back and really figure out what their game plan is moving forward is when they're constantly cycling through new hires. People are staying for only a few months, a year. They're not doing the work. There's a disconnect between them the leader being able to delegate the work, perhaps a lot of misunderstandings between the employee and the employer, the business owner. What I find is that a lot of the time entrepreneurs they have the algorithm or the equation in their head. They know how their lived experience, their education, their background, the experiences they've had building this business, it manifests into something that they feel like is intuition that they have trouble communicating to their team. And understandably, it's tough. I'm not saying this is an easy thing to be able to tease out what part of your upbringing, what part of your education, all of these factors that are going into how you're making decisions. But if there's a disconnect between how your team is making decisions and how you would make decisions, and if this happens frequently, and you're getting frustrated because the work keeps coming back to you, you have to do it yourself. You end up letting people go and having this revolving door of employees. Part of the issue is that there's something unspoken that's going on between you and your team that you're not able to completely articulate the values that you're bringing to the table, the framework for making decisions, and build that into the structure of the business too, because you want it to be systematic. The idea here is that you're not driving the values and the decision-making process of the business. The structures that you have, the process that you have, the culture that you have within your business is generating decisions that are approximately what you're looking for and repeat the outcomes that you're looking for, right? Because you're looking to repeat what you can do, what you've been able to build the business to, but you need your team to do that. You need the business to do it as a matter of process and do it repeatedly.
Yeah. Yeah. And a good one guest, she was talking about creating SOPs like videos and just having a library to common questions. And the other thing that a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with is they feel like they always have to be on the go. And then if they slow down, they're afraid their business will fail or they won't meet their metrics.
Yeah. I want to challenge that frame a little bit because and it's a good question. It's not a bad question here, but it's thinking that way also then assumes that's what you need to do to hit your metrics, that going is the way to hit those metrics, that it is the way to accomplish your goals.
Mm.
However, if you're constantly in go mode, constantly doing the next thing on the checklist, you're not taking that step back to think more strategically. And as you grow your business, this is to say, when you're starting out early in your business, you need to be doing a lot of the things. You need to be wearing a lot of the hats. You need to be every role in your business. But as it starts to grow, you need to be able to find time for the strategy, make sure you're moving in the right direction, make sure you're capitalizing, you have enough free time to actually grab those opportunities that come your way. Because if you're already working 60, 80, 100 hours a week, your calendar's full plus a lot more. And if there's a bump in the road, right? Maybe it's some regulatory issue or legal issue you need to grapple with. Or it's something that is a new client opportunity that you're trying to bring in. But your schedule is already maxed out. Where do you find the time to do that? So there's things that you miss when your schedule's full of just doing the grinding work, when you're just doing the things that are checking things off the checklist. And so if you don't have time to do that, if there's an emergency, if something happens in your space in your business where it's going to knock you out, force you to adjust and adapt to the new situation, if you don't have that mental bandwidth and the time to be able to accommodate those challenges, no one else is going to do it for you. You're the best one to find and solve those leading edge problems and challenges and take advantage of those opportunities. But if you're doing everything that you need to do to keep your business afloat as well, you just don't have it. You don't have enough time to really be able to solve the problems and find the opportunities. You're just going.
Yeah. Yeah. So these are the common problems. There's always more. For the audience listening, be sure to check out the links in the show notes. And shifting gears, the question is, when stress and pressure comes, what mindset shifts help entrepreneurs deal with this constant barrage of stress and pressure?
Yeah, it can be a downward spiral. This is one of the concepts we've been working with a lot more recently is when you're working with a downward energy spiral. And this, I don't want this to sound too out of I don't know, out of the box, but it's really about your productivity is determined by your focus, your attention, the brain power that you can apply to that problem. And that's real, right? And if you're not sleeping, if you're working 12 hours a day, hitting the bed, getting up and doing it the next day, all of those things just add to this brain fog that you might be experiencing that keeps you trapped in this cycle, right? And so you can get into a cycle where you're constantly trying to catch up. That analogy about a busy week turns into a busy month, turns into a busy year or a busy decade. that's real. And it's because you get trapped in this downward energy spiral where you don't have enough time to breathe. And so you're just trying to keep your head above water. And you could be working at 50% capacity and you don't even know it, right? I don't know if you've ever had gone through a push phase and then you finally get some sleep and have a day off and you just left, the fog clears and you say, oh, wow, I forgot how this felt like to actually think, to be clear headed, to think clearly. And that's what happens is when you're deep in it, you don't realize how murky things are because you're in this downward energy spiral, downward energy state. And it can be challenging to work your way out, right? Because we're talking about what feels like emergencies, what feels if I don't do this thing, my business is going to collapse. No one else is going to do it. But if you stay in that spiral, if you stay there, you're going to stay there, right? You're going to be stuck in this downward spiral. And you need to start putting these pins in and start to climb your way out. And some of that involves just doing the tactical stuff, right? We've been talking a lot about the mindset and the approach that entrepreneurs need to have. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of mechanics involved in getting your business streamlined, systematized, automated, incorporating AI or using new tools and doing it effectively, right? But blocking out the time to be able to take those incremental steps where you can, for every hour that you invest, you're saving 2 hours. For every hour you invest, you're saving 10 hours by starting to put those pieces in place and being tactical about how you're moving up that spiral to save you that initial hour or two a week, the 5 hours, 10 hours, 20 hours a week that can really free up your mind and space to start moving ahead and solving those big thorny problems.
And on the topic of, because we talk about outsourcing and delegation, and I think it's been a very commonly used phrase, delegate, but what are some practical ways to delegate very specific things that you can do to delegate to free up more of your time?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, especially following on from one of the symptoms of entrepreneurs I find a lot is really holding on tightly to the work and not being able to communicate what they want to delegate, to communicate the framework about how the work needs to get done, about the decision-making process so that they can start to make decisions on their own and you can replicate your genius that you've brought to bear on building this business and make it systematic in the business. And so when we talk about delegating, when I think about systematizing your business, that's linked to delegating. You have to be able to communicate effectively about the systematic approach to solving these things in your business, to do the work of your business so that you can delegate it, right? So this is one of those missing gaps of everything's in your head. So it's not systematized, it's not documented. So no wonder you're going through an employee a month because you're not communicating effectively how you systematically get this outcome in your business, right? All of these things are intertwined about why delegation's maybe not working, why the work comes back to you constantly and you have to just redo the work. And so you think, why do I even have this person on my team? Why don't I just do it all myself? That's a common thing, a very common thing that I hear people say. So all that is to say about delegating is you want to be smart. You need to do your homework. You need to have enough time in your schedule to be able to think clearly about how this work is getting done, how to systematically approach this problem, how you would approach it, how you would explain it to somebody else to approach it. What are the details you're not thinking about? Gathering all that stuff in the systematization side and then passing it over to someone so they have a clear roadmap of what to do, where they have autonomy to make their own decision, where they don't, where they need to follow a very prescriptive outline about how to get this outcome, because that's what's going to get the best outcome for the client or the customer, right? You need to give them the framework, the boundaries about where they can work, where they can't, be clear about it, because then you can attract people who understand where their boundaries are. People who are A players want to know what the rules are. They want to know what the rules of the game are. They want it to be fair. They want it to be clear. They want to be able to do the work that they're best at, and they don't want to work in the situation where everything's getting done ad hoc. Some people thrive in that space, but it's pretty rare. Most of the time, people want to thrive in some ambiguity where they get to problem solve, not where the whole thing is ambiguous and needs to be solved.
Yeah. Talk about entrepreneurs struggling to set boundaries with clients, employees, work hours, always like on a phone, or what are some practical tools, tactics, and strategies?
Yeah, that's a good one because there can be a lot of pressure for companies to be always accessible if clients' expectations are a certain way. Some of those things form out of a relationship. A lot of the time, it's a customer relationship issue as opposed to it being a demand by the customer. Sometimes customers and clients treat a certain vendor a certain way and not another vendor who's established strong boundaries about how they will and won't work. And it's one of the things, as we talked about, there's a lot of things that feel like emergencies, that feel like they're the kind of end of the world type of pieces where someone has no control over the environment that they're operating in, but they really do. But you need to have enough space, mental space, to be able to understand what is and what isn't. It can be challenging to change customer behavior and client behavior as well. And so some of these things you can build in automation in your business where some things can be handled automatically so that you don't, especially if it's one of those, if it's not like a long tail problem, if it's one of those common, not necessarily an FAQ, but you're able to problem solve about how this gets handled. It could be that you're the one to handle it. It could be that someone else is going to be on call. If you really have a situation, but some businesses are very structured that you're basically an emergency service provider, right? And that's just the nature of the work, right? All businesses come in all sorts of shapes and sizes, and what you need, what the customers need, and what the customers demand. It doesn't mean that you have to be the one to handle all of those issues, right? And that's where delegation comes in, having clear processes and protocols to follow so that someone else can do it and get a reasonably similar outcome to what you're looking for, so that you can maintain quality and customer service and think through what that looks like, so that you don't have to be the one who's always on call for a middle of the night, midnight, 2 a.m. issue that you're grappling with.
Yeah. How can people find out more about you and connect with you and learn more from you?
Yeah, Christopher, my website's really the best place. And I have a short, for all those busy, overworked, overwhelmed entrepreneurs, a very short webinar masterclass that covers how to streamline and systematize your business, really how to build in automation and develop the leadership skills that you need to move this business from where you are, especially if you're struggling, to being able to put it on autopilot. So that's all at my website, willity.com. And the webinars at willity.com/watch. That's really the best way to connect, watch that, and connect with me if you want to talk more.
Yeah. Awesome. Really enjoyed this and keep up the great work.
Thanks, Christopher.